Dr. Austin Chiang, welcome to the show. How are you, my friend?
Good. Thank you so much for having me.
I am so happy we are finally doing this. Thank you. You're out in LA. We're making time. I appreciate it a lot.
Oh, yeah, I wouldn't miss it.
Oh, you're the best. So, how many days did you spend on the road in 2023? Do you have any idea?
I think it was somewhere close to maybe 180 or so. So pretty much half the year. Yeah, out on the road.
Why don't you have any bags under your eyes? What are your secrets?
What are you talking about? I feel like they're pretty obvious.
I think you're doing a great job. So 180 days, so half the year on the road. Obviously, you're up to something. And I think we're here today to unpack that.
Yes, I've been busy with a lot of different, hats that I wear. So yeah, really excited to get into it.
Let's start with, where did you grow up?
I was born and raised here in Southern California, and then I actually moved abroad to Taiwan when I was 10. So kind of not the traditional thing to do. And then I came back to the States for college and everything beyond that.
Interesting. What prompted the move at 10?
Actually, it was for my dad's work, so it was kind of out of my hands.
Okay.
But I thought actually in retrospect that it was a great, experience for me to be exposed to a different culture, to pick up another language, just expanded my horizons a lot.
Interesting. And what did your dad do for work?
He's an engineer by training, and he currently works in the semiconductor industry.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you remember that move? Like, that's pretty wild, right? Moving from Orange County to Taiwan. That's pretty significant.
Yeah, it was. But fortunately, before that, every summer I'd go back to Taiwan to see relatives. And, I was one of those kids whose parents sent me to Mandarin school every week. So the transition wasn't as bad. I thought that, it actually felt like I was going to where I would go vacation. So, and then plus I ended up going to an American school. So it was kind of like a school that was otherwise pretty much the same as a school here. I ended up taking AP classes and always knew that I was going to come back for college.
Oh, interesting. 你好吗,朋友?
I love that. Nice.
You're a doctor now, and a very accomplished doctor, that is. At what point did that become your vision?
I think growing up, was exposed to other family members who are in medicine. My grandfather was a surgeon in the World War II era. I have two cousins who are in medicine as well. So I kind of had that in the backdrop. And, my parents exposed me to other experiences like volunteering in hospitals. And it kind of ended up being a good fit for my personality. So I kept an open mind in college. I took a bunch of different classes and explored a bit, but ultimately felt like this was the right path to take.
Which parts of your personality do you think align to the physician world?
I think it was just my values of wanting to take care of other people, make sure that they're living their best lives and living to their highest potential, and just wanting to do something that was gratifying in that way.
That's amazing. I love that. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. Can you kind of walk us through your academic journey, right? It's certainly accomplished, and Permission to Shine is all about coming on and actually having the opportunity to brag about yourself. And so I would love for you to walk us through what that journey looked like. Just like kind of quickly, undergrad, med school.
Sure.
What was that?
Yeah, so undergrad was at Duke. I was a biology major and a music minor. Med school was at Colombia in New York City, and then I stayed for internal medicine residency. And then after that was another 3 years of training as a gastroenterology fellow in Boston at Brigham and Women's Hospital. And during that 3-year span, I also decided to do another fellowship in bariatric endoscopy, so weight loss procedures, as well as get a master's in public health from Harvard. And then I did my final year of training, my third and final fellowship at Jefferson in Philadelphia, where I ended up staying on as faculty after I was done.
That's amazing. Which of those institutions did you find had the most talented people?
Ooh, that's tough because I feel like they all have talented people in maybe different areas within the system. I think I would maybe argue that the institution that had the biggest influence on me and impact was probably Brigham and Women's. My mentor, Dr. Chris Thompson, is the father of bariatric endoscopy, this master innovator. entrepreneur. I think a lot of being in the circles that he associated with and getting exposed to his kind of network and his experiences really is a lot of what shaped where I'm at today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and if you're in the GI world, Dr. Chris Thompson, that's a massive name, right? And so for you to have him as a mentor is a very unique opportunity. And I'm curious, I think for any of us, right, getting the right mentors will change your life.
Absolutely. Yeah.
What advice would you give to somebody who wants to find a mentor and get close to maybe they have this person in mind, right? And they're this superstar. How do you get their attention?
Oh, I think I owe a lot to various mentors, not just Chris, but also I think along the way, right, there's some people who just resonate with your values, or people who believe in you and show an interest and want to kind of help cultivate your journey. And I've leaned into that as much as possible. I've been very fortunate to come across people who've expressed that pretty openly. And when they do so, I really try to, make the most of that relationship.
Yeah. What do you think Dr. Thompson saw in young Austin?
I mean, I don't know. I think that maybe like a lot of my mentors, and I'm sure we're going to be talking about like the social media piece, I think they saw that I was doing something different and not afraid of naysayers along the way. And just over time, were able to witness how I took something that maybe was unpopular at one point and tried to make it something popular simply because I believed in it.
That's beautiful. The social media. You're a sensation.
I don't know about a sensation, but I've definitely made a little bit of a mark.
That's amazing. And a much bigger mark than I would say most physicians. And you were one of the first GI doctors to have this massive social media presence, right? 570,000 followers on TikTok. And I've personally gotten to see the impact of it, going to conferences with you. And literally, I feel like I have to become like a bodyguard, because you have people, not that you need it, but like people just swarming you, and like literally people running to try and catch a photo with you. And it's always so endearing to see your reaction that you'll stop and talk to, there'll be a line of 10, 15 people waiting to talk to you, and you'll give each and every one of them just like the most attention and presence. I've always found that really inspiring.
Thanks.
Yeah. So congrats on being that person.
Thank you. Yeah. I mean, the thing about social media was it was never about the attention or the fame, or, I've had a lot of great opportunities that have come from that, but it really all started from a place of wanting to put out accurate information and believing in the reach of social media as a way to reach a wider audience and get the message out there, whether it's about medical knowledge, whether it's about, my career journey and helping guide, the next generation of GI doctors. So it was all, I rooted myself, my social media presence in that rather than in the desire to be, well known.
Yeah. Right. That's just a after result.
Yeah.
Which is really cool. Can you remember the start of it all?
I've always loved social media. So even like back in the MySpace, Friendster, days, and I just, even just for my personal use, just enjoyed being on social media. Facebook came out my freshman year in college, and so I was the target demographic. And ultimately, I felt that I just saw kind of how the reach of it was so great, and how people outside of healthcare took advantage of that and used it to cultivate a following and get their message out. So I actually spent some time at ABC News during my residency, because I started noticing patients coming to the hospital because of things they were hearing through TV or the news. And I got curious about how they received their medical knowledge. So I spent some time at ABC News as the part of the team that kind of vets the medical news and determines what gets put on World News Tonight, or, makes sure that the information being discussed on Good Morning America or The View were accurate. And at the time, they were hosting weekly Twitter chats about various health topics. And from there, I thought to myself, oh, well, maybe one day I could be that authority to talk about what I'm trained to talk about, but on social media. So slowly I got started on Twitter at first. And then over the years, as I became more comfortable putting myself out there and my face out there, I got on Instagram and YouTube and TikTok and all the different platforms. But that's really how it all started.
Wow. And I'm curious, you kind of mentioned your mentors seeing something unique in you, right? Like most physicians don't think to take on social media. Now they do. But what year was this when you were first starting?
It was like around 2013.
Wow.
Yeah. And there were some mentors who were kind of skeptical and didn't believe in it, and others who, came up to me and said, I think that there's something there, but let's like try to do it in a way that isn't going to alienate you from our professional community. And they actually encouraged me to turn it into an academic pursuit. So I could still pursue this thing that I really believed in, but as long as I, went at it from a different approach. So I started doing research on social media's interactions with, the dialogue that was happening online and our field. But yeah, it's interesting how it's all come about. And I think now when I think about, this whole journey, subconsciously, I feel like that was my way of trying to reach a global audience and having a more global impact somehow beyond that one-on-one patient interaction that we usually get as physicians. So it's interesting. There was another mentor of mine, Dr. Eve Slater, who was the former Deputy Secretary of Health and Human Services. And she actually, during my residency, had told me that she encouraged me to think beyond kind of the traditional patient-doctor model, and kind of planted that seed that maybe I could think about doing something more globally, kind of like what she had done with her career in having a broader impact through politics and whatnot. So I kept that in the back of my mind. And so now where I think about where I am today, it's sort of, she was one of those people, I think, who maybe subconsciously like planted a seed in my mind that had me, that led me down this path of social media and everything else that I've done professionally.
I'm sure not everyone was a big fan of it. I'm sure there was people in your hospital unit that were like, oh, there's Austin on social media again, Were there times where you felt like, is this worth it? Like, is this smart? Like personally, like with the podcast, like I'm a huge believer. Obviously, I know it's my calling and I'm committed to it and people love it. But there's some people, especially in LA, they're like, oh, it's another guy with a podcast. Like, imagine that, and you kind of feel like an idiot at times. Yeah. Do you ever remember those feelings?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. No, there's been times where I've wondered if it was worth it, if, some of the criticism that I received, was valid. And you kind of, iterate and you learn from those experiences, and you might change some of what you do to fit things a little bit better. But yeah, absolutely. I many times thought about like giving it all up, and but I felt like at the root of it all, it's still I felt there was a need, and I still felt like I was the person to fulfill that need.
What did your parents say about it?
They were a little uncomfortable because I think, they didn't want me exposing too much of my personal life, and part of my social media presence was putting myself out there and humanizing the profession, because it's not just all about medicine and science and data. It's also helping people understand that, as a doctor, I share a lot of the same questions and concerns and experiences that they do. There's that human factor that I think we've lost a little bit in how we view health professionals and healthcare in general. But over time, I think that they've come to accept it, partly because of a lot of the opportunities that have come about from this, and they've seen how there's been a net benefit from all of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What are some of the doors or opportunities that it's opened for you?
Well, I think career-wise, it's definitely given me a lot of visibility, and allowed me to also very quickly, I think, especially like when I got on these social platforms, quickly establish a network among my peers, whether it's within gastroenterology or, with other health professionals or even beyond that. It's, taken me to the White House a couple times as part of the healthcare leaders in social media roundtable, also representing in my role at Medtronic. And also like, kind of the next thing that's coming up for me is a book launch that's coming out in April, Gut and Owner's Guide is what it's called. And I don't think that that opportunity would have necessarily come about, at least as soon as it did, if it wasn't for social media and getting the word out there. So yeah, a lot of these sorts of like media type opportunities as well. When Good Morning America was looking for someone to comment on Bruce Springsteen's peptic ulcer disease, they hit me up, and yeah, just really grateful for all of these opportunities.
That's incredible. There's so many things, and you've just become such a dynamic human being, and you've created it. And I'm sure there were a lot of naysayers along the way. And so I'm just proud of you for trusting your gut and continuing with it. I think it's important for people to realize like it's been a decade journey of social media for you. Like it takes time.
Yeah, it wasn't an overnight affair. And as much as there were naysayers, like I'll have to emphasize again that there were a lot of supporters too. And so, those people who nudged me in that direction or kept me on track, I think I owe a lot to them.
Yeah.
Sure.
Any other advice that you'd give to people who do want to grow their social media presence to kind of share, their platform and information for good?
I think that it still has to be rooted in something that's authentic. I think social media these days, it can definitely be used as a way for people to earn, a secondary income and to monetize their social media presence. And for me, that has never been the case. And I think I've been able to maintain a very objective perspective as a result. And that's allowed me to kind of, be able to do what I do without being too consumed about that being a source of income for me. And I knew that from the get-go, I didn't want my popularity or how people perceive me to be tied to my livelihood. So not that there's anything wrong with that. If people want to do that, then great. But just know that, it's a huge emotional burden if that's how you want to position yourself. But if it is coming from a place of like education and genuinely from that place, then, that alone is, at least for me, what drove me to keep going.
Mm-hmm. True or false, TikTok outed your LGBTQ journey?
A little bit, yes.
Care to share?
Yeah. So back in 2020, it was an honor, really, that they named me one of 25 LGBTQ trailblazers on TikTok. So it wasn't restricted to healthcare. It was kind of all sorts of creators. And with that, they said, oh, there's going to be a magazine feature. And, my biggest question was like, how did they even identify me? Because I never really talked about myself in that regard. But from that, again, I took advantage of that. And I said, yes, absolutely, feature me, even though I don't know how you came to that conclusion. And the following year was nominated for a GLAAD Media Award as a result, which was great. I didn't win, but that's okay. The person who won totally deserved it. But again, like just a phenomenal opportunity. And, TikTok, I should say, from the beginning was one of the more supportive platforms when it came to working with creators. And I mean, at the height of TikTok, I feel like was with the pandemic, right? And so there was a lot of attention on healthcare, which is maybe why, I was able to work with them more closely in a lot of ways.
Yeah, that's really cool. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
Do you feel like that part of your life has added pressure to your journey? Like you've always just had to perform, like going to Harvard, right? Being the leading physician in a high pressure endoscopy room, now being an executive at a large corporation. Do you feel like that adds pressure to all of it?
Yeah, I mean, thanks for asking that, because I think, early on, I didn't want my personal life or, orientation to get in the way of my career or get in the way of opportunities. So I was very hesitant to put that out there. And I think, with knowing that I had the support of my employer and, all these different media features that centered around that LGBTQ identity, I think I became more and more comfortable sharing my story. And personally, I look up to a lot of people who do share their story, right? Because like it takes a lot of courage for them to put themselves out there and show that, whatever they have accomplished was, enhanced by that part of them. And so I can only hope to do the same for other people out there who might be struggling with the same thing. So I know we live in a very different world maybe today than we did, say, 20 years ago.
Hmm.
But I'm sure there are people who probably share a similar concern or have families that share that concern. And I've had to work through that with my family. And, still at times have, or at least I wonder whether or not there are things out there that I don't have access to because of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you're comfortable sharing, how old were you when you came out to your family?
I'd say it was probably around like high school, college age.
Yeah.
But it's been like 2 decades in the making. It was definitely a slow, gradual process, a tough one, a lot of difficult conversations along the way. I think part of that journey of acceptance has been facilitated by, how the political climate has also changed and for the most part, like better over time. And so it's been helpful to, still be able to, do what I do in my career and get places, and show that that hasn't quite gotten in the way of anything.
Hmm. I think that's really important for people to hear. So thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, let's transition from social media to you were practicing physician at Thomas Jefferson in Philadelphia, and you're planning on being a full-time physician, right? That's kind of,
That was the path. Yeah.
and then what happens?
So out of the blue, I received a call, or I should say a text, asking me to call the president of Medtronic GI at the time, now Medtronic Endoscopy, by my current boss, Gio DiNapoli. And when I called him, he said, well, we've never had a chief medical officer for our business, and would you consider? And that really caught me off guard because in my mind, this was sort of a role that a lot of people who were much farther along in their careers would entertain, and not an opportunity that many people at my stage in their career would even be offered. So I had a lot to think about, because I don't think that even to this day, there are very many people who have had the fortune to, have an offer like this, but also who've had to think about, their career path and where that would lead them in the future. So yeah, it came out of the blue, and here I am 2 years later.
What was his pitch to you? Like, why do it?
I think that he was seeking an internal voice, a medical voice, to help provide input for all the different functions within the business. But he also wanted probably somebody who was aligned with his values. And for people who don't know him, he's very forward thinking and innovative and willing to take risks. And I think what he saw in me, especially with the social media side of things, wasn't that there was a social media following as much as I took something that was kind of uncharted territory and then kind of was able to drive others to, come along.
Mm-hmm.
So it's with that spirit that he wanted me to bring to this role as chief medical officer.
Yeah. Gio has this insane vision, I think, and the ability to look around corners that other people don't have. Because you're right, you are much different than I think most chief medical officers in the business, at least the ones that I've seen. And he made a brilliant decision in doing so. Like, Medtronic is so much better because of you.
Oh,
And so I've got to give him props, and for having the vision to do it, and you props for having the guts and to pursue it.
Well, thanks. I mean, I'm sure there are people out there who probably were also very skeptical and had a lot of hesitation around, me coming into a role like this. But yeah, I think that it's been a great journey so far, and the feedback that I've gotten has been, very positive. And I like to think that it's come at a great time because I feel that we're also becoming, med tech in general is becoming much more patient facing, consumer facing. And I personally think that we're doing so many cool things at Medtronic. I wish the general public had, a better idea of what we were doing and what the process is of innovation and how we actually take an idea and turn it into something that can potentially impact millions and millions of people out there around the world.
Mm-hmm. Well, hopefully we can help fix that a little bit today, with this.
Yeah, I hope so.
For those who don't know, what is Medtronic?
Medtronic is the leading medical device manufacturer out there, and they historically have been known for a lot of their cardiovascular products like pacemakers and heart valves and things like that. But also there are a lot of there are other arms to Medtronic, the diabetes arm that's doing great work, the neuroscience arm. They make a lot of kind of products related to spinal surgery and nerve stimulators, and there's also the medical surgical portfolio within which the endoscopy business sits. And there's all sorts of surgical stapling devices and things like that. And within our business, we have a lot of diagnostic tools and therapeutic tools that we use, that my colleagues and I use as gastroenterologists to help diagnose diseases and treat them.
Yeah, that's cool. Thank you for that. Medtronic started because I believe it was that there was a power outage at a hospital in Minneapolis.
Yes.
And at the time, pacemakers, you were plugged into the wall to keep your heart operating. And when the power went out, they lost function on the pacemakers.
Yeah.
And so local engineer Earl Bakken said, well, I got to do something about this, and created the first ever wireless pacemaker in his garage.
Yeah.
And now it's
like in the 50s. It was incredible
wild
how far it's come.
And now they're doing like don't quote me on this, but like 30 billion in revenue annually with 90,000 employees globally.
Exactly. It's turned into, a huge operation. And it's so exciting to see, how things have progressed. And, a lot of the innovations that we make have touched so many patients around the world. And without them, medicine would look very different today.
Mm-hmm. And then within endoscopy specifically, can you name a couple of diseases that people might be commonly familiar with that Medtronic endoscopy's devices would help physicians treat?
Yeah, well, right now one of our focuses is colorectal cancer screening with detecting precancerous polyps, because everyone out there starting at age 45, if you're average risk, is supposed to get a colonoscopy. And so one of the devices we have now is an artificial intelligence powered tool to help doctors do a colonoscopy better by detecting polyps and preventing polyps from being missed. And that's one area that we're focused on. We also have devices to help with the diagnosis of certain swallowing disorders with the esophagus. We have needles that we use to diagnose certain tumors like pancreatic cancer. We also have devices that help treat tumors, like we have a liver tumor ablation device. So, the thing about the gastrointestinal tract is there's so many different organs. So it's very, there's such a wide variety of organ systems that we touch on. But that's also what makes this field really exciting.
That's cool. As Chief Medical Officer, I imagine that you get to help look at the new technologies that Medtronic would potentially partner with or acquire. Can you speak to the types of kind of metrics or things that you're evaluating?
I think that first and foremost, we want to make sure that there's a need for this device, the clinical need, and if there's going to be improvement on top of what's existing out there already. And I think a large part of what I've learned in being in this role is that there's so much work that goes into operationalizing all of this and making sure that you can actually roll out a new technology appropriately, the training requirements that it would take to, bring, all the doctors across the country up to speed with learning something totally new that they potentially have never been exposed to before, and how to safely do that. And kind of weighing those, trying to understand what the barriers are to adoption and whether or not there's, reimbursement for it, because the healthcare system here in the U.S. is so complex, and we want to make sure that it fits in well and just kind of to make sure that everything goes smoothly and there aren't any hiccups along the way.
Mm-hmm. That's cool. Is there a time that you're like, man, I just miss being a physician and a physician alone?
Well, luckily, I still have the ability to practice a bit. So I'm still active clinically part-time. So I still get to do procedures and see patients, and that kind of fulfills that void. But really, it goes back to the idea that, in this role, I'm able to potentially impact, people at a different level, at a population level. And I think that that's part of how I justified making this transition, was that, being involved in this process, I could potentially impact that much more people.
Rumor has it you got to meet Katie Couric recently.
I did.
Oh, she's my like total crush.
Katie Couric is incredible, and we owe a lot to her in the GI field, because in the early 2000s, after her late husband passed of colorectal cancer, she decided to go on air on the Today Show and get a colonoscopy done. And as a result of that one airing, there was a 20% spike in people getting colonoscopies done, which we call the Couric effect, and it's been published out there. It's a known phenomenon, and she knows it too. But she cares deeply about health, and not just about colorectal cancer, but other ailments. And so it was really great meeting her recently, and personally thanking her for everything that she's done.
What is she like compared to what we see on TV?
She's so genuine. She's just like what you would expect from TV, which is great, because not all famous people or well-known people out there end up being the way they appear on camera.
Don't meet your heroes, right?
Exactly. But she was so kind and funny, just humorous, and very easygoing. And there were so many people talk about people swarming her for photos and wanting to get a chance to chat with her. There were so many people, but she took the time to take a picture with everyone, and just so sweet.
You mentioned the Couric effect.
Yes.
If there could be a Chiang effect, what would it be?
Ooh, there could be an effect named after me. I mean, I would love for there to be some sort of tangible measure of the impact of being a doctor kind of out there, present on social media, and seeing, I mean, that's an association that's very difficult to draw right now, but sometimes I get bits and pieces of patients who will reach out to me on social media and tell me that something that I talked about online has helped change their health behavior, or has contributed to them sharing something with their family members. So I would love for that to be kind of my legacy in some ways.
I'm curious how you handle all three things, right? You're still a practicing physician in Philadelphia. You run this incredible social media empire, and then you're a chief executive at a massive Fortune 500 company. Are there pillars that you have to kind of keep front of mind, or behaviors that you have to do to maintain and manage it all?
Oh, absolutely. And I don't think that I've achieved the perfect balance yet, nor do I think that I ever will. I think it's going to be a very dynamic process. I think I have the benefit at this stage in my life having more flexibility as well. I wouldn't be traveling 180 days out of the year, potentially, if I had a family, if I had other things that I had to care about. And as a result, I've been able to be very focused on my career and my role and my responsibilities there. But I think that it's a constant shuffling of the deck. Like, I'm always prioritizing, what is most urgent. Whatever is sitting on top of the stack is what I have to deal with in that moment, whether it is with my, chief medical officer role, whether it's with my clinical role, working in the hospital. So I'm constantly trying to find balance. And, I think that just like what I owe to my mentors, I think that there are other people who make my life a lot easier by helping me. I owe a lot to them, because if it weren't for the people around me, I wouldn't be able to do things as efficiently as I do. I trust a lot of these people to help me out when I can. So I'm really appreciative of that.
That's really cool. So with your three buckets, do you feel like they complement each other, or do they take away from each other?
They definitely complement for each other. I think even the social media thing has taught me so much about storytelling and communication and interaction with other people that I've taken into my role as CMO. And from there, help me with my internal interactions and communications with my colleagues there, but also externally, right? And how to communicate what I'm doing there and what I'm learning there to my colleagues within the GI space, to the general public. Um, I think it's an obvious kind of compliment to have my clinical role in the hospital serve my role as chief medical officer. But, I also feel like part of the struggles of healthcare and medicine is that we are operating in these silos. And part of what I'm hoping to give back to my GI colleagues is an understanding of how things work on the innovation side, so they can also appreciate all that it takes to, bring a new device to market, a new technology or new innovation to market, because there's so much that happens in that process. And even once it's out there on the market, to maintain that and make sure that it remains safe and that quality, is still solid. I think that it takes a village. And part of what drove me into this CMO role was because I didn't understand that process, and I was curious and I wanted to learn more about that. And because there's only one of me in this role, I hope that, to really, feed that back to all of my colleagues, so everyone can, know how to work with us and know how to potentially get their ideas to market one day.
Mm-hmm. I think for Gio to have the vision to bring you on, right, says a lot about his leadership, and to be so comfortable and confident to not feel threatened by it. I think that's probably worth acknowledging. And I'm curious, what are the top things that you either admire in him or have learned through him? Because I do think he's a really extraordinary leader.
Yeah. Gio is such a force to be reckoned with.
A strong Italian for sure.
Yeah. And it's amazing. And truth be told, part of why I decided to take on this role is because I saw that he had a great track record. He's young and very forward thinking. And, to be in the position that he's in today, I admired that and I wanted to learn from him. I think that he's just very innovative and, unafraid to do something different and be creative. And he's also very passionate about what he does. Like, you can feel that he has his entire heart in what he does, and that means a lot, because that's, I think, what it takes to be a good leader, to motivate other people to share that vision. I think that's, one of his superpowers. And he's also really good at expressing himself. So I've realized that he is a master communicator, can get up in front of a crowd and, really just galvanize the whole team and get people excited and energized.
Makes you want to run through a brick wall. At least I do afterwards, right?
Right? Yeah, totally.
I think with all of this, you have to acknowledge that there's trade-offs, right? There's certainly things in life that the buckets aren't getting filled because you're doing so many of these amazing professional and personal things. Like, what are those things that you feel like maybe you're missing out on?
I think from a very practical standpoint, just being all over the place and not being at home as much has definitely has had its downsides. I'd say that this past year is actually an improvement from the previous year, because I've been a lot more intentional with how I've approached it and made sure that I spent more time at home, maintaining relationships and friendships and making sure that that part is still, well taken care of. Because I started noticing that without that, it would take a toll on my mental health. So that's definitely something, because time is limited and you do have to give up something to do something else. But I've made adjustments and I feel like there's still more to be done. But I also, I think that that's been important for me personally, because that's how I derive a lot of that's my outlet, is like kind of talking to my friends and family about, struggles openly, and they've been able to give me feedback, and sometimes, it's helped steer me in a certain direction so I don't kind of totally derail. But yeah, that's probably I'm still working on, kind of getting back to a good steady state.
Come on, the people want to know about Austin Chiang's dating life.
I mean, it's ongoing, so, single and ready to mingle.
You heard it here first, folks. If you had a dream city to meet your life partner, what would it be? What would the situation be?
Oh man, I mean, I I feel like I still consider myself a New Yorker. I feel like to me it feels like the center of the world where everything happens and goes down, and so I would love that. I think that um that's really kind of the main place I would think about.
Would it be like in a bookstore? You like both reach for the same book, and it's your book that's coming out in April?
Oh, like a little meet cute like that? I don't know about that. But yeah, I mean, I think that that's what I'm looking for is somebody with, shared interests and shared motivation and ambition and someone who can understand what I'm doing because it is a little bit of a wild ride. And so, uh, that sort of understanding is going to be crucial to making sure that anything works out.
Yeah, they'll be a special person for sure.
I sure hope so.
They will be, no doubt. All right, let's talk about your book. It's your first one,
Yeah.
and it's going to be coming out in 4 months.
Yeah, just about.
Oh my gosh. So what's it been like?
I'm very excited. It's the first time I've ever done anything like this. And again, something that sort of was very fortuitous. I was actually, unlike a lot of other authors, I think, who approach their publishers with a pitch. The publisher reached out to me and wanted me to write this book about gut health, all things gut health related. And it's called Gut and Owner's Guide. And it's an illustrated book, so it's a little bit different in that it's in color. It's got great visual aids. It's written in a way that's easily understood by anyone and everyone, and it's really meant to give the reader the information they need to empower them to kind of make personal, make a more informed medical decision for themselves and just have a better understanding of their gut in general and also procedures that they may encounter along the way.
Did it take more work or less work than you thought it would?
Ooh, I would probably veer on more work than I thought. It's a very complicated process with a lot of moving parts, and a lot of back and forth and edits and feedback to me and feedback to the publisher. But it was very exciting. And, I owe a lot to the people, again, that I was working with, the editors, the illustrators, feedback that I got from you and many other friends and family about how this should be approached. So I'm very excited. I'm excited to see how it's received. But I think it's kind of different from a lot of the other books that you'll find in this kind of GI health section of the bookstore because it is illustrated, because it's written in a way that's a little more fun and at times cheeky. So hopefully people will enjoy it.
Yeah. Well, I just got to see the cover for the first time, and I think it's beautiful. And just knowing how important our gut is, right, to our mental health, to our everyday life, I think it's a well worth read. And I encourage everyone to go get it when it comes out in April.
Yes, April this year. So coming soon.
Okay. That's very exciting. You mentioned a music minor, didn't you?
Yes.
Does that mean you've ever put music out on SoundCloud or not?
Maybe in private, which I've shared with you.
So what's that username again?
If someone's really curious, they can probably find me somehow. But no, the music minor was actually centered around violin and violin performance. So I grew up playing the violin starting at age 3. And ended up, being concertmaster in high school and then again in college. So that's it's interesting because when I landed in college, I didn't necessarily love playing the violin, but it was something that I felt like I was decent at. So I tried out for the symphony, ended up doing well, saw that I had an opportunity there that potentially I could become concertmaster one day. And I again took a chance at an opportunity because at the time there wasn't really a violin or a even performance related minor. It was more about composition or music theory and stuff like that. But what I knew was performing, so that's what I ended up doing. And yeah, it was a great experience. I felt like I actually had control over what I wanted to do versus maybe when I was in high school, it was a little more driven by my teacher and my
Mhm.
parents, and I ended up taking that all through med school. So even in med school, I still played in chamber groups because there were so many other talented musicians actually in my med school class, which was pretty cool.
That's amazing. You have so many talents, my friend.
No, well, thank you.
How's it go? It's like, can we
No,
keep each other
no.
company? Oh, company.
You're gonna have to pay like copyright on that.
Please do not come after us. We mean no harm. That's amazing. What's one thing you're manifesting for yourself in 2024?
I think that, gosh, I feel like part of me tries to not set myself up for too much disappointment. So I just want to like do the best that I can with what I'm given. And right now all my energy is really focused on making sure that my role at Medtronic is, that I'm devoting a lot to that, that I'm not letting my clinical skills slip, and that this book is gonna, do well, and that it reaches a lot of people and hopefully will help them in their own medical journey.
The last question I have for you is if you could think back to young Austin when he was 10 and he was leaving Southern California for Taiwan, what would that Austin think about everything that you've been able to accomplish in your life thus far?
Ooh, I think he would be truly impressed. I don't think that this was ever in the books, so to speak. Like, I don't think that he necessarily realized what potential he had. And even to this day, I still feel like, even deep down inside, I feel like, yes, there's more I have to give, but I also want to appreciate and celebrate, where I am right now, and not get too ahead of myself, and not let things get to my head, because I feel like that could easily backfire. Um, and maybe I owe it to my parents to kind of instill that sense of humility, and just, being appreciative, like where you are. Because without that, I feel like I could have, things would have gone in a different direction. But yeah, I think back then there was no, no clue. All I probably was focused on was making sure that I could fulfill the expectations of my parents. And at a certain point, much later in life, I feel like I've been able to achieve that. And now it's more about, okay, what can I do for my own satisfaction, and how do I find gratification in what I do, to align with like what I want out of this life. So still working on it. And I truly believe, like, if you ask me 5 years from now, it might be a very different situation. My goals may have shifted. It's a very dynamic process. And I really subscribe to that idea that things are ever changing and it's never constant. And, where I am today, and how I think about where I might be in the future could be totally different. So just go with the flow, make informed decisions. I try to be thoughtful in any decision I make, especially when it comes to like career or big moves like that. Um, but also stay grounded.
Wow. Well, I'm so proud of who you are and how humble you are and smart and thoughtful and fun. And as crazy as it sounds, like everything you've accomplished thus far, which is massive, is just the start. Like your imprint on this world is going to continue to grow at an ever-changing pace. And so thank you for being on the show. It's such an honor. And
Thanks
thank
for
you.
having me.
Yeah,
Amazing. Yeah, you have, especially among your long list of guests. It truly is an honor to be on Permission to Shine. So thanks for having me, Andrew.
absolutely. Anytime. We'd love to have you back.